Hello and welcome to ConTinual, the convention that never ends. My name is Jean Marie Ward, and I'll be your host tonight for a panel on how to support your writing habit. With me tonight are 5 wonderful writers who all have different experiences in that regard, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Randee.
Hi there, I'm Randee Dawn. We'll talk more about this, but I'm a journalist as well as an author.
Okay, great. James?
I am James Palmer. I write science fiction and pulp adventure. I also do work as a freelance copywriter, content writer, and blogger.
Okay, great. Rachel?
I am Rachel Brune, and I write speculative fiction. I also edit horror anthologies with Crone Girls Press, and I do a bunch of other stuff besides that as well.
Okay, great. Davidson?
My name's Davidson King. I write LGBT gray romantic suspense and paranormal. And I also am a stay-at-home mom, which will make it very interesting as to how I support my writing habit.
Yeah, everybody's going to have a different experience here. Okay, and Lola?
My name's Lola Strickland, which is my pen name. You'll see me as Lola Strickland too. That's what's on my birth certificate, but it's boring. I'm an author and I write short stories too, but I have 2 day jobs which aren't exciting. That's okay.
Well, that's basically going to be my first question. How many folks have an outside income to support their writing? I mean, or on the flip side, can you support yourself entirely from your writing? Lola, since you sort of kicked it into gear, tell us a little bit about what actually pays the bills.
I have 1.5 jobs. The first one, I'm a Navy contractor, so I sit on the phone and I answer calls. And being a writer and having comprehension skills actually helps a lot because there are a lot of emails and a lot of work instructions. And funnily enough, I volunteered to rewrite the work instructions. They took that as not a positive thing. They took that as me saying something negative, but I was willing. I was going to do it, but they said no. So yeah, I do that. And my second job, which is, part-time, is I'm a notary, which takes comprehension skills and spelling and things like that, although I still can't get Massachusetts. I have to look it up every time, and I'm like, did I put too many S's? So that's my Achilles heel is Massachusetts. But yeah, so that barely pays the bills. And healthcare, roof falling in, vet visits, there's so much. Unless you're Stephen King or somebody like that, I don't know how anyone can make a living just on writing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Rachel?
So up until about 6 years ago, I had a full-time job. I was an active duty Army officer, and that was great. I still had time to write. And then prior to that, I was an Army journalist, so doing all that stuff. That was really great. But then when I got out at the end of 2014 and had my first child, and I was trying to find a job and it didn't really work out. Then I had my second child. I started to look around for other stuff. And so I'm still an Army reservist, which basically pays the car bill.
Okay.
I'm still married to my spouse. So when it comes to the household, that's who's paying the mortgage. I drive Lyft, which pays for cover art and marketing for the Crone Girls anthologies. And I also do some freelancing as far as editing goes, editing and coaching, although that's a little bit of a hiatus because of the fact that I'm currently doing my MFA in creative writing and writing my thesis novel. So yeah, so there's a little bit of everything. I've worked at a church as a youth director part-time. I've taught classes like local community college classes. I've sold artwork, not artwork, knitting and things like that at a farmer's market. I'll try anything. Maybe not everything. Oh my goodness, this is public. Anyway, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. Yeah, crafting and stuff. Davidson, the idea of having to do a bunch of things because somebody else is not paying the mortgage, but you want to do your share seems to resonate with what you said earlier.
Yes. So like Rachel, I have a spouse. So their income is pretty vital and actually carried us for most of our life. I have 3 children and my eldest is autistic. So finding a job, that could let me basically leave at the drop of a hat when I had to go, became nearly impossible. So, we sat down and it was like, you're going to, if you want to stay home. And then I had 2 more children after that because I'm crazy. And it just kind of became a norm, and they got older and I was blogging and, everything got more expensive. And I couldn't get a job anywhere. I mean, I worked at a truck stop, I did everything and it wasn't working because I needed to be home. And I was just like, what can I do at home that I can bring something in and contribute something? And I just decided to, on the side, kind of write a book. And in between, the deal was I do the stuff, take care of the kids, do all the field trips, the doctor's appointments and everything. I didn't have actually time to have another job anyway. So I needed to be home. And my first book came to light because people invested in it. I had people invested in the book and it probably, if they didn't do that, I might have never published that first one. And from there, I kind of have to make my own income to support my books while not dipping into the household stuff. That's the kind of how it has to work. So I could explain later what I do to expand and try to bring in, more than I'm putting out, but that's the.
Okay, no, we'll come back to that. Randee, your job as a journalist, basically, I always find that a hard thing to do because yes, you're getting skills that can reflect, but at the same time, you're using up your writer brain. Are you still full-time journalist?
Sorry about that. I had myself on mute. Yes, I am actually. I mean, I got into journalism because I had the genius idea when I was in high school that, if I write and they pay me to write, I'm a writer, even though what I'd really rather be writing is fiction. And it hadn't occurred to me that there would be, word drain or, gosh, I've been writing all day. Do I want to write all night? I've been lucky in that I kind of do separate the two. I mean, I can write the journalism that I do. I'm an entertainment journalist. So I'm not out there, covering a war zone. I'm not out there doing the real hard investigative work on who poisoned the river kind of stuff. I'm talking to celebrities. I'm writing about television. I'm writing about movies, which, hey, great. That is very interesting on its own. But I'm able to sort of put that off to the side and then work on my fiction at other times. The main issue for me is finding the time to do it. I think someone else said you don't have time to do another job. So yeah, I do have I get paid for my writing. I can support myself with my writing. I do have a second income now because I'm married now. But for a lot of years, it was all me supporting me. And I was very nervous. Now I'm less nervous, but I do support myself with the journalism. And then the fiction is something that I do whenever I'm able to.
Okay. James?
Sorry, I was dealing with the cat.
Hey, cats are fine.
Well, he might destroy something in here, so I kind of, and the door was closed. I want him to be able to get out when he needed to. But yeah, I do work a day job. I've had a day job pretty much the entire time. I work for an electric co-op. So I will do anything to not have to do that someday. So I do I've done copywriting, I've done business journalism. I'm currently writing for a real estate law firm, writing real estate blogs. And I've got stuff on Kickstarter, and I have a Patreon. I'm all about multiple sources of income, in addition to, the traditional, Amazon royalties and things.
Yeah. Okay, how many folks are using multiple streams of income in addition to their primary source of income?
Very
Do you mean like
definitely.
other avenues for our books? Like not just
Well, basically, there's something that James mentioned, something that I had on my list of things to bring up was the idea of the internet providing certain alternate streams of income through crowdfunding like Patreon and Kickstarters and other things. Folks who may have a YouTube channel or bloggers who reach a certain level of popularity do get the ability to earn income through views. For example, if you have a YouTube video, my husband happens to have a video a rim shot. He did it as a one-off, as an animation, and it has 1 million views. If it were not 4 seconds long, you could stick an ad in that, and YouTube would give you some money every time somebody looked at your video. But being as it's 3 seconds long, any ad would be longer than the video, so it really doesn't work. But those are, some other alternate streams that folks who are writing or creators have been using. So, James mentioned the Patreon and the Kickstarter. Do the rest of you have similar streams of that type? Yeah. Lola, you raised your hand.
Well, they haven't paid off, but I have a Humble Bundle thing where if you use my code to buy Humble Bundle, eventually if it reaches a threshold, I get money. I've never gotten money from it. In fact, I end up buying stuff from Humble Bundle. I probably spent $500 with them already. So I spend money with them instead of getting money. And there's a site called Buy Me a Coffee. It's a tip jar site.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never gotten any money on that. And also, I spent a year recording my book, the podcast version of my book myself, and editing it and doing everything myself. But then I lived in an apartment at the time, so you could regularly hear washing machines going off and people walking by and stuff. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it out, because even when I tried to take that out, then there would be a gap that didn't sound like the rest of it. And I just couldn't get it right. So I ended up just putting it on archive.org and releasing it as a podcast for free, because it just wasn't quality enough for me to try to put on Audible. So everything I've done has really been me spending money to do stuff. So I consider them lost leaders.
Oh, okay, okay. You also raised your hand, Randee. Did you?
Well, yeah, once you sort of defined what that meant, maybe this doesn't quite count, but the two things that come to mind for me were I did co-edit an anthology that came out, and the publisher, it was called Across the Universe: Tales of Alternative Beatles, and it came out at the end of 2019. And the publisher did a Kickstarter ahead of time. So we knew the authors would be paid, we knew the editors would be paid. So like that's technically another stream. In terms of the journalism, other streams, like I do the journalism, and I'm not talking about that, but I also took on about a year ago, I write trivia questions for an app. So that's another stream of income,
That counts. It really counts. That's
Yeah.
How did you get involved with that? I mean,
Well,
that's pretty wild.
I wanted to talk about this a little bit later on, and we can talk about it now if you like, if we want to keep the conversation going. But one area I would suggest people who might be watching this, or the authors in the room, there's a lot of these websites, and this is pretty much specific to female or female identifying authors, just so you know. But on Facebook, there are these groups that are called binders. And it's like binders of freelance writers or binders of sci-fi fiction writers. And it's It's a riff off of that Mitt Romney binders reference from a bunch of years ago, which is why it tends to skew female and female identifying or non-binary. But there's a lot of job call outs on there, and sometimes it's for an anthology if you're on a fiction one of these. But there was one that I was on that was looking for that somebody put up a job request, and they said, we're looking for people who can write about these topics and can do trivia questions. And I had never done trivia questions, and I just submitted, my resume, and they called me, and it all worked out. So I do a set of 12 trivia questions every day. But I would recommend, and it's a decent amount of pay, but it's not something that I could retire on, and it doesn't mean I got to quit any other jobs. It's just extra, really, on top of that. But Facebook does have these great binders groups, and you look binders of, and then if you start filling that out on Facebook, it'll default and it'll tell you what some of the binders are out there. You apply, and if they let you in, there's a lot of people who post for jobs within the industry, and there's ones for editors as well as graphic artists. There's all different kinds, and it's a really good resource for trying to find gigs.
Cool. So we basically go to Facebook, you do the search function up in the upper left-hand corner or wherever it is in the phone,
Right.
and you type in binders.
Binders of, I think, is the best way to do it. And, I can't vouch for every single one of them. I can't vouch for any of them. I can only say that I'm on a few of them. And I do see it's a great way to tell people about your projects.
Mhm.
And it's a great way to get your name out there. And quite a few people do post jobs that are available. And some of them are age specific, binders of over 40 authors, for example. So, yeah.
I had never even known that was there myself. Was anybody else aware of this? Well, I could tell that there are going to be some very busy typing figures when we finish recording this.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's an unusual stream. Davidson, you were saying that you had some interesting ways that you're pulling in funding.
Right. So one of the things that was always vital to me was that I was not obviously putting out more than I was bringing in. And we all struggle writing, not writing books, but getting them to audiences. And one of the things that I went ahead and did is decided, what more can I do with the books that I already have? Get them into the eyes and the hands of other people who might not ordinarily pick up a book, without fronting thousands and thousands of dollars just to get it there, like to get an audiobook out or to get. So I actually did something that some people don't particularly like it, but I reached out to production companies like Tantor Media, who does audiobooks, and they give you an advance and they produce your book, your audiobook, and then once you work off those royalties, you get, they have pretty much all of my books out there. Also, I went and decided to contact a interactive game company to take my books and to Chapters Interactive and make my books into basically create your own adventure, taking my characters and my books. I make pretty good money with that. The advance is really good. And I could tell you in the first quarter, I got my advance paid up and then some already. Mm-hmm. And that was really exciting. So I print them, obviously. So I have paperbacks, audios, interactive games for my books. And I just kind of feel like when you get them out to a different audience. So plus I also contacted translation companies, Italian, French, German, and get my book out to those markets. And I have throughout the year incoming royalties from all over, from Italian publishers to studios to production companies. And I didn't put any money out for that money to come in. And that was kind of like a huge deal for me, because I refused to take any household money to go ahead and pay a narrator to $2,000 to narrate my book and hope that I get it. This way, at least I know, well, I'm always making something because I didn't put anything out. So
okay, I've got a couple questions related to that. And the first is, you approached companies that work like publishers. You know, I I didn't know, for example, that translators worked like that. So there are translation companies that buy work like a publisher.
Some of them will pay upfront, but like, for example, like Quizinote Edizioni is the one that does my Italian publisher. They didn't give me an advance for my book, but I make money on them every quarter now. But I don't
Royalties
have,
count. When I say
yeah,
publisher, I'm
yeah.
because a
They're
small
the
press
only
is,
ones, yeah, they're the only translation companies, are the only ones that I don't get an advance from, but every quarter I've made something. So that's, you know, and I don't pay for the covers. They do their own side of covers, and but I have approval on all art and stuff like that, because I don't want like,
that's a very good deal. Do you think it has to do with the genres you're writing in, or are they open? Are the audio companies and the production companies open to a variety of stories?
variety. None of the companies that all my books are associated with are strictly LGBT at all. I know that when Chapters Interactive got a hold of mine, they actually weren't very LGBT centric and were actually looking for more diversity. But if you go like on their site, or you go on to like Tantor Media site for audiobooks, you will see a like all different kinds of books, all different kinds of audios, genres, like, you know, instruction manuals read by like Sean Krisden or something like that. Like it's crazy. And it's just really, for me, it's been, I haven't had negative experiences with any of them. And I'm sure people are just, well, you make more if you put that out. I'm like, I got 3 kids, one of them's in college. I can't do that. So, you know, everything for me is more like I'm always making something, you know, so that's, you know, good.
Yeah. So, do you have all of these other versions of your books on your website?
Well, I don't have all of the versions. I have to actually update my website a little bit better, but I have all my books there. But if you go onto my book on Amazon, it shows you the audios of them, and it shows you the translations of them. So my buy link would take you to my main pages, which would show all the versions of my book minus the chapters, because that's a whole different ballgame. That's not associated with Amazon.
Okay,
So
yeah.
that would,
Yeah,
Again,
I'm just thinking of, you know, the gaming companies. I didn't even know that they were in the market for existing IP. I thought they were doing their own developments, but
they have their own, it's an umbrella company, so they have like different, like, you know, areas, but the interactive games, they're crazy. Like, they are really popular. I didn't even realize it. I was just like, sure, you can, you know, we can do this. I think this might be, I thought, oh, I'll make like 10, $20. And I was like, no.
If I can chime in on that too, I mean, in terms of the interactive games, there's a company called Choice of Games, and they're another one of these companies. Now, they want you to write the whole thing. They're not going to sort of say, we'll take your manuscript and turn it into something. So there's a lot more involved, but I do know some authors who have worked with that, and they actually are very well paid for that project. Now, it's not easy working. You have to do a lot of follow their instructions on how to create this game, but basically you can pitch ideas. They'll pick the one they like, then you flesh it into an outline, then if they like it further, you get into the more granular aspects of it, and then you can get paid for it. That's actually, in a backwards way, that is how my book that is about to come out in August got started. It was going to be a game with Choice of Games, and it got too hard for me to finish. And then I said to them, look, I can't do this, but this is still mine. And they said yes, and I turned it into a novel. Here we are. But my point is that even if it doesn't work out with them, you might end up having a book at the end of it.
yeah, I'm just curious because I mean the rights buy for audiobooks and for you know, various media companies is pretty straightforward. But when you're talking an interactive first-person game, do you still retain control of your characters, or how does that work? Because that, you know, our IP is our future, our future income. So
Yeah, so they, because it's a make, like, choose your own adventure in a way. One of the things that I made very clear was that, they couldn't make my character become something that I didn't. For example, if my character is a gay man, I don't want them to be able to make him a straight man, because that's kind of like crapping all over my, whole existence here.
that's your brand right there.
Yeah. And that was solid. Things that they could do are like decide how they want him to look. Like they could change the appearance. Like, oh, I don't like him with blonde hair. I saw him in my mind with brown hair. That's fine. But the story follows my story, and like they can make choices. Like he goes into the restaurant, he stays in the car, but it still follows to where my story is going at the end. Like there's minor artistic, licenses, but there's none that I'm sitting there going like, how dare you? Like, I'm not sitting there going like, but they're like, well, because it's your choose your own adventure, if he stays in the car, we have to, manipulate it a little bit, but it doesn't change the story. And that, it's like when you watch a movie and you're like, that wasn't in the book, but they had to do that because it didn't play out well on screen that it did in the book. As long as you get to where it is that I'm trying to do without like destroying my entire like vision, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I know, because I know that sometimes when I'm doing my revisions, I look over it and go, that's all in so-and-so's head. That wouldn't play well on screen. How can I turn this into dialogue or action or something? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like Harrison Ford said to you can write this stuff, but you can't say this stuff, and it's like, how do you, make it workable? So that's what they have to do. They have to take a whole different market in your book and make it workable to their audience without, erasing my story.
Mhm. Yeah. Rachel, you've talked about doing crafting, but you're a publisher. Does that add to the income or does that subtract from it?
The author income comes in and then the publisher income goes out.
So you're sort of doing it the opposite way of everybody
Right?
else. Your writing habit is supporting this other thing you do.
And my gig economy, and my gig economy gig, I guess you would call it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really interesting in that we at this point, Chrome Girls has published 5 full-length anthologies and a number of shorter projects of like 3 novellas each. And we've just started to get to the point where in the horror genre or in the horror community where people are starting to hear of us. We've been going, we went to the Scares That Care AuthorCon in March. We'll have a table there in July that Kyle Gazander is going to be running. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. We're looking at potentially using crowdfunding further down the road, which wasn't really an option if you don't have a community of people that knows who you are, if that makes sense. So we had thought about doing crowdfunding, and it just wasn't something that was available because we're like, well, we could do a Kickstarter and I'll contribute and you'll contribute, and then we'll have $5 when the Kickstarter ends. Yay. So we've been investing a lot of time and travel and all of those things to spread the news. The other thing too is time invested in creative projects. I get burned out real quick on creative words. I know that there's some people who are just like really amazing and they can do like ghostwriting and a Patreon and a podcast, and then they have a blog and then they do this and that. I'm just like, I can do one of those maybe. I had a Patreon and it was difficult to upkeep, and then I had like 1 patron left and I was like, nah, I'm good. So it's just kind of that mix. For me, the gig economy, driving Lyft, I can get in my car, I drive around, I meet a bunch of people. Driving is also when my brain kind of clears out, so I can make money and also have a little bit of downtime from thinking, and then I can come back and sit at my desk and keep writing or keep editing if we're working on an anthology, which we're doing right now 2 at once. or anything like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, for me, I have to have something that's not writing in order to be able to write.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay, great. James, you seem to be the outlier here in that you are, kickstarting and crowdfunding rather successfully. So could you tell folks how that has worked for you and what recommendations you might have for folks who seek to go in that direction?
Well, I will say for Kickstarter, um, we had a problem previously with the audience for publishing projects wasn't really there. It's there for comics, it's there for independent film, it's there for gaming, but it wasn't there for fiction until Brandon Sanderson happened.
Mhm.
And now there's a huge and growing audience for publishing projects. There's people who go on Kickstarter, they may not know who you are, but they're just looking for cool projects to back. Kickstarter will send you stuff. It sends me stuff all the time. Its algorithms think I will like. So there's an audience there now. I've seen publishing companies do a kind of a fund drive for their entire year's slate.
Mhm.
And they'll say, and this is what we're going to publish with that money. Here's what you get with that money. Um, my first Kickstarter didn't fund, but it only failed to fund by a little bit. If I had asked for less money, it would have funded and then some. The second one, the first one was for the third volume in my Monster Earth anthology series. The second one was for a box set omnibus edition of my Monster Earth anthology trilogy. So I kind of cannibalized off the failed one for this one, and that one did really good. And I'm on my second one now, and it's funded. I didn't ask for a whole lot though, but it's funded. Best practices for me is to go and look for similar projects to the one you want to do. If nothing else, you'll get great ideas for rewards. I found a guy doing an anthology project, and he had some cool rewards that I copied for mine. One of them was for $200, I'll dedicate the book to you. I only have one of those. I can only do one of those, but somebody took that one. You can do Tuckerizations. You can kill somebody off in your book. You name a character after them and then kill them off. There's just all this fun stuff you can do. And that kind of builds your audience on Kickstarter, and it gets your book going in where you're already in the black before you launch it on Amazon. Your cover's already paid for, your editing's already paid for, and it's ready to go. And you can release it on Kickstarter and then do a separate launch later for Amazon and the other retailers.
Mhm.
For Patreon, I haven't quite been as successful. I make about $26 a month. And I back a couple people too for a couple bucks. So it just comes out of that. It feeds itself. So I haven't been as successful with that as I like, but I think if I keep pushing and keep building the audience and build my name recognition elsewhere, then that'll come. I'm thankful that it's there. Every Friday I post an update. When I finish a short story, I put it up there for free. I try to do little videos and things. It kind of keeps me in the habit of just creating content. I don't do anything that I wouldn't already be doing. I think that's a trap that people get into, because then they feel like they're working for Patreon, and then if they don't have an audience yet, they're doing a bunch of stuff for free that they wouldn't be doing anyway, that they can't use elsewhere.
Mhm.
Can I ask James a quick question? When
Sure.
you write a story and put it up on Patreon, before doing anything else with it, your people who pay for you get to read it first. That doesn't count as a first publication, does it? Like, is that just you taking out of your own pocket?
Um, that might depend on what editor you try to talk to. I kind of do it on the down low, and I don't tell other people, hey, my short story blah 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 is up on Patreon. I just say I've got a free story on Patreon. It's a small group that sees it. So I and most of my stuff is indie anyway. I'm gonna do it in one of my own anthologies or something. Stuff that I publish for other people, I'll put it up there later after the time limit has run out. So
cool.
Lola, you look like you're wanting to say something, or you're commenting off, with your mute on. So, do you have anything you want to add?
I'm just laughing because James said, well, I do it on the download. And I'm like, not anymore. This is going to be published. I hope those future editors don't see this. But that's an interesting thought. I've heard that Patreon takes a lot of work. And that's one of the reasons why I never did it, because even with the little things that I do, like Humble Bundle, I can never get any traction. So I'm not going to spend, days and days trying to set up a Patreon when it's just not going to happen. I think maybe that's good for people who already have a solid audience.
It is.
Yeah, but if you're, the 5 reviews on Amazon are from your coworkers like me, then maybe it's not for you. Start slowly. And
Yeah, I was just about to say it also helps if you can produce content fast. I mean, the most successful people I've seen on Patreon seem to be writing machines.
And I'm not like that.
I think that as somebody who has, if not side gigs, a lot of friends and family who sort of qualify as side gigs, I don't produce that content that fast. I'm in awe of those like Sean Ann McGuire who don't sleep, and she doesn't sleep. She'll tell you she doesn't sleep, but her production is, or Brandon Sanderson, to say another one. I mean, how does the man write so many books? Does he write one book on one side of the brain and one book on the other, and he's got 2 hands going in different directions? I am in awe. But I think that is a big plus if you're doing a crowdfunding or an indie publishing scenario, because indie rewards volume.
Yeah.
And that's just the name of the game. We've talked a lot about how you support your writing in terms of monetary ways, the day job, the editing gig that actually is taking out money from the writing, and so forth and so on. But let's talk about something slightly different in terms of support before we go. How do your various gigs support your writing from a character or plot or intellectual thing? For example, Rachel, have you listening to what's going on in the back of your lift gone, oh damn, I got to use that? Or I know your military experience, if you ever have to craft a soldier or any kind of military scenario, people don't realize how hierarchical it is. Honest to God, they don't. Army brat here. So, anytime that can, feed something that you are writing, have you found this to be the case in, your various gigs, that what you've heard, what you've experienced feeds into all that horror?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's feeds into it both by, as I'm writing, things will come from someplace, and it's usually because I've gotten out of the writing chair and I've gone to meet people. It's been, let me see, I do tend to write a lot of military characters. The thesis novel that I'm working on right now is a military fantasy novel. So yeah, there's definitely lots of stuff going on in there. And it's not from choice. Like, I didn't say, oh, I think this would be a really good idea if there was more, military people working magic out in the middle of North Africa. It was more like I sat down to write, and that's what came out, because that's where I have just been for 20 some odd years. It's not so much with the lift, not so much with that gig, but I think it's just because I've only been doing it for a few months, so it hasn't yet settled in. But yeah, it definitely, for me as a writer, there's that time away from the desk is as important, if not more important, than the time that I do spend in front of the computer, because that is where I meet people. That is where I see things and I experience things. And that those experiences all kind of congeal and come together and make connections that then come out on the page.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Davidson, what about you? How have your life experiences, your work experiences supporting your writing habit, supported them intellectually and creatively?
Well, being a stay-at-home mom though I'm not stay at home. I never stay anywhere. But I'm also the caregiver to my mom. So I drive around all over, doctors, hospitals, schools, field trips, all different places. And I can't begin to tell you how many times real life experiences have had a plot bunny happen right onto my lap. I wrote a book about, a crime ring based on people who panhandle on the street, because my mom lives in a city and they're on every street corner. And I, for like a whole year, like watching, and the story was just kind of like building in my head as I'm watching each one. I'd notice that there's like a guy who rides a scooter that warns them that the cops are coming, and I would pick up on it, and I'm like, there is such a story there. My kids, having issues with bullies. Their bullies die in my books. Like, I use the names, like I do it. I don't care. It doesn't, they don't have a soul. My daughter will say something and she's like, oh, I wish that I could do this. And blah, blah. I'm like, that's a great way to torture somebody, So I will take that and I'll put it into my book. So for me, I take so much real life and the visuals around me, and kind of like, I'll even have my mom who'll read it and be like, is this your father? No, it's totally my father. So that's basically what I do.
Yep. Okay, Lola, what about you? How about your side gigs? Your day job. How has it supported your fiction, intellectually, creatively?
When I was in college, I had a job as a political poster. That sounds more interesting than it was. I was calling and going, hi, I'm calling on behalf of the Democratic Party. Are you going to vote for blah, blah, blah? Okay, thank you, bye. So that was that. It was very repetitive. And, you would just go into a state. But one of the things that I would do is when I found interesting names, I would write down the name. And I'm like, Donda Lee, what a great name. That's going to be a character. So I love doing that. And, that was joy. I got a little bit of joy out of mindless calls.
Yeah, being a contractor isn't quite as mindless, though, because the calls are never the same, I should imagine.
Yeah. I had to be careful with my Navy job, because if they find out, like, if I use a name of a customer and it kind of gets out, that might look bad on me, like I'm using the customers.
Mm-hmm. File the serial numbers off, split them up.
Right, exactly. So Donda Lee will become Donda Jackson Lee. So and sometimes I'll do that. If I find an interesting name, I'll just kind of do a different version of it, kind of like Game of Thrones, how he would do that. So yeah, I find ways to find characters in the people I talk to.
Okay. James, what about you? How has the experience of Patreon and Kickstarter, other than financially, supported your writing intellectually, creatively?
I as far as that stuff, I think it kind of gets me thinking about marketing and thinking about my reader base, my readers, and what they might want and what might be cool for them. Excuse me.
Marketing is something we haven't talked about, but that's totally valid. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a copywriter, I did marketing. I thought about marketing a lot. I think marketing's an interesting subject, and it's something that we writers are not above as much as we might like to think so. So it's very important. Just kind of gets you out of your own head and out of the world of the characters and kind of into the real world and thinking, what cool thing could I do for my readers this week or this month, as far as providing content.
Great. Okay, thank you. And Randee, what about you? How has
Yeah.
your day job, your side gigs supported the fiction
Well, I mean,
intellectually, creatively?
right. So, the book that's coming out in August is called Tune In Tomorrow. I literally could not have written it without being an entertainment journalist first, because it's very inside baseball in how to make television, and it's very behind the scenes. And yes, the characters are inspired by people I met and all of that. I mean, my other fiction, maybe not quite so much, but I do tend to hew toward pop culture, either, rock bands or TV related stuff in quite a bit of my fantasy. So yeah, I mean, I've been talking about this with a lot of people. There's that old phrase that every author hears, write what you know. Well, in order to know things, you can't, you need to get out in the world and experience and get your hands dirty and go and meet other people and do things that are not simply the writing. And that's how you learn the things that you will then feed what you want to write later. It's kind of like you're putting everything into a great big funnel, and it's getting slowly filtered out, and what you pick and choose ends up coming out on the page. So write what you know tends to mean, what else have you done with yourself? Write about that. So in terms of my entertainment journalism, absolutely, it's the thing I want to write about. It's the thing I know the most about.
Okay, before we close off, are there any tips or recommendations that anyone would like to offer the members of our audience in terms of what they should do to support their writing habit? Based on your own experience, what would you recommend? What's the one quick thing you'd recommend? Randee, do you want to start us off?
Well, I want to actually, there is one small thing I wanted to address, and I'll address it here and let everybody else give the tip. If you are interested in small gigs that you work on the outside where you're freelancing or you're working in the gig economy, that's a lot of what we've been talking about tonight. Do yourself a favor and go research what's called the AB5 legislation. It started in California. It is redefining what an independent contractor can be. There is a federal law version that is supported by President Biden. We don't know how far it's going to go in Congress, but it basically will require almost all of these companies to define you as an employee. They really do not want to have independent contractors if it goes through. So be on top of this legislation, because if what you want is to do small gigs to support your writing, currently they are trying to take that away from you. And I know that you'll see that's a bit of a conservative standpoint, but it's absolutely true in this case. So do your favorite, AB5, just do some research on it and then talk to your local Congress critters.
Okay. What about you, Davidson? Any one tip that you would recommend?
The one tip that I would recommend is to step out of your comfort zone. If you're comfortable writing, stop being comfortable. It doesn't hurt you anything to reach out to other resources, like I said, like chapters, like Tantor. Worst they could say is no, but you want to get your book, your story, your vision out to as many people, because someone's going to read it, and then someone's going to say, hey, I read this book. I'd love to make an audio out of it. And I did have that happen once. And that's, so if you're comfortable, stop being comfortable.
Okay, cool. James?
I would say just in general, if you're gonna do something, try to do something that enhances your writing and uses your writing. It's very easy to get caught up in get rich quick schemes and internet marketing stuff, where you'll be running around so busy doing that you won't have time for writing, and you may not even make money at it. So don't go in, don't make in NFTs or do forex trading, or learn how to flip houses. uh do something with your writing that's going to enhance that, and don't take time away from it, because that's what you're doing. You want more time to write, not less.
Okay, Lola?
Don't do what I do, which is when I'm like doing my third draft, which I've been doing for a long time on my latest novel. Don't get in a loop where you're looking at the same chapter and like, I could have said that differently. I should say that a different way. And then you change something and you realize, oh, I have to change everything else now. And then you're lost in the sauce and you're like, what time is it? What day is it? What year is it? Don't do that. Just make a plan and stick to it.
Okay, Rachel?
Beware the sunk cost fallacy. And that's kind of life advice in general. But if it's not working out, then do some ruthless prioritization, because I've definitely spent time on things that I should have just kicked to the curb so I could focus on the things that I needed to be focusing on, which is the writing. I mentioned Patreon. I kept trying to make that work for far longer than I should have. And it was taking a lot of time and mental attention, mental energy. So just sunk cost fallacy. If it's not working out, don't keep doing something that's not working out for you. Try something new, because there's always something new. In fact, we have a whole hour panel of things you could try.
Okay, great. Well, we're coming up against the end of the hour, and it's really good conversation. I thank you all. So I'm going to ask you all to give us your latest work and where folks can find you on the web, starting with you, Rachel.
Sure. So my latest book is The Amazing Stories of Detective Boudreaux and Sergeant Woodson, a steampunk adventure in 3 parts. And this is available on Amazon, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited, and paperback now. As far as Crone Girls Press, we just put out Objectified, which is a 3-novella anthology of cursed objects with a feminist gaze. So you can find us at cronegirlspress.com and visit us on Facebook in the Facebook group for Crone Girls Press.
Okay, and that's your website too, or do you have a separate one?
Oh, that's it.
Okay, great. Davidson?
So my latest work actually came out in May, which is Emperor of Dragons. It was book 2 in my Black Veil series, Paranormal. And I have another book coming out next month called The Button Man, which is not paranormal at all. It's a assassin murdery book. I am terrible. I haven't written the blurb yet. I wasn't prepared. And you can find me. My website is davidsonking.com. I have a Facebook author group called Davidson King's Court. I'm pretty much everywhere as Davidson King author or Davidson King 11. So literally, like, I think I'm like the only Davidson King in the world. So you shouldn't have too hard of a time finding me. So that good luck.
Hey, it's great to have a unique name that is easy to spell.
Yeah, it was a little hard. I was going to do the initial thing, but it came out like either MLK or MLD, and I'm like, or MD, and I'm like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not Martin Luther King. I'm going to get, like, people are going to come at me. Like, so I had to kind of like, I had to get creative.
Yeah, well, it works. It's very unique. Okay, Lola, what's your most recent release, and where can folks find you on the web?
I wasn't lying when I said that I got lost in the sauce. I've been stuck editing my recent novel for a long time. So the one before it is called Trudy Lim's Spaceship Captain Earth Detective. And about a year ago, I had help making a print version. So there is a paper trade, whatever you call it.
Trade
version.
paperback.
Thank
yes.
you. Trade back. I'm still messing up. Trade paperback version of it that you can order. Or you can get the digital version. And that's that. But the one I've been working on is like a teen paranormal thing, and I'm stuck. I hate editing. I really hate it, and that's where I'm at. But I'm going to do it. Anyways, if you want to find me, my website disappeared, and of course I don't have the to go and figure out where it went. But I have an archive.org, and my name there is Cerulean Lobster. That's my handle from 25 years ago. It's CERULEAN Lobster. And I have all the podcasts. I'm also a podcaster. I have all the podcasts I've done, my book podcast. Just all my short stories are there. Everything I've done is there. So that's a good place to go. Of course, it's free.
Okay, great. James?
My most recent book's been out for a while now. It's The Complete Monster Earth. It's all 3 Monster Earth books in one monster-sized volume. I'm running a Kickstarter now for a short story collection called Six from Beyond, stories from the Edge of Infinity. You can look that up on Kickstarter. There's 6 days left, I think. And you can find me at jamespalmerbooks.net.
Okay, great. And Randee?
Right. So I have, as I mentioned, I have a book coming out on August 16th called Tune In Tomorrow. And it is about a mythical reality show. It's a reality show run by mythical creatures for mythical creatures, but starring humans. And there's all sorts of wacky shenanigans and puns and security dragons and bottomless pits throughout the entire thing. So that is the thing that I'm pushing now. If you want to find me and all of the information you could possibly ever want, I am at randeedawn.com. Randee is spelled with 2 E's, so RANDEE Dawn, DAWN.com. And if Tune In Tomorrow sounds like your kind of read, just go to tuneintomorrow.com. And it'll take you to the webpage with everything you need to know and all the pre-order links and everything. So hopefully I will hear from you that you got some good laughs this summer.
Hey, laughter at this in this season really needed. Yeah.
Yes.
2022 indeed. Anyway, well, thank you all for a great panel, and thank you out there from ConTinual, the convention that's always here when you want us to be.